Hello and welcome, I'm DDF Racer, and over the course of the past few days, I've been playing Automobilista 2. Now, if you've never heard of Automobilista 2 before, then let me just take a few seconds to fill you in on the details. This sim has been developed by Reza Studios, who are responsible for some of the best force feedback, physics, and AI out there in the form of the original Automobilista game. Have a look on Steam, and you'll see that the vast majority of reviews for Automobilista are absolutely glowing. However, the engine that game is using is getting a little bit tired by today's sim racing standards. And this is where it gets interesting. For Automobilista 2, Reza Studios have decided to upgrade to the Madness graphics engine, as made popular by Project Cars and Project Cars 2. Now, this engine is responsible for some of the best graphics out there and is also incredibly well optimized for VR. So, if Reza Studios can take this Madness engine and couple it up with the hard work that they've done on the force feedback and the physics and all the stuff they're known to be amazing at, then as sim racers we could be in for an absolute treat. Now, I've been caught up by the hype train a few times before when it comes to new sim racing releases, so I didn't want to get too excited or, even worse, be responsible for fueling any more unjustified hype myself. But after following the development updates for the past few months, I just have this feeling that Reza could be the kind of people to surprise us all and pull off something spectacular. So much so, I decided to invest your money into buying the early access backer package for Automobilista 2. Now, when I say your money, I'm referring to people who have donated during my recent live streams or through the PayPal link on my Discord, link in the description. Your names are up on top of the screen right now, so if you're watching this video, just want to take this second to say thank you very much. You made this possible. So, February 29th came along, and the very first iteration of the AMS2 beta for early backers was made available. At the time of recording this video, I have 7 hours in-game, and wow guys, I think we're onto a winner here. Disclaimer time. I want to make it clear right now that what you're about to see is not the finished game. Automobilista 2 is still in early access, and what you're about to see on the screen is it's not finished. There's going to be bugs, there's going to be problems, there's going to be weird glitchy things, so just bear that in mind, guys. The developers are going to work on these problems over the next few months, and I suppose that's our responsibility as early access backers as well, is to find these bugs and make sure they get reported so that you, the public, don't have to experience them. Right then, let's get stuck in, shall we? So the very first thing you see when you load up the game is this menu. There's a single race, there's test day options, however the championship, multiplayer and time trial aren't available at the moment. Let's have a quick look at the options. You can see there's all kinds of different configurations, however the user profile doesn't work at the moment yet either, so that is still coming. But yeah, if we have a look at these settings here, go back to the race menu, you can see test day, you got your session settings on the left, you got your vehicle selection in the middle, you got your selection of the track on the right hand side, and let's have a quick squiz through that now, shall we? There's not that many familiar names here. There's a few. I mean, Interlagos, Spielberg, which is obviously the Red Bull Ring, Montreal. You've also got Interlagos, Adelaide, Azure. There's a few familiar circuits here, but the vast majority are relatively unknown Southern American tracks. I mean, some of them look absolutely fantastic, but I just don't know what they are. Do bear in mind, though, that this is not the final list. This is very much a work in progress. And as you can see on the car selection menu here, some of the placeholder images are missing. So, yeah, Reza Studios have still got quite a lot of work to go with this, but it's very promising for the very first beta. Now, there's a decent selection of cars as well, a few different types. I mean, I must admit, I've never heard of half of these before, and even the ones that I am familiar with, they're not called the official names that they're called because obviously Reza Studios don't have the license for Formula 1 content or, you know, Virgin Australia Supercars content, that kind of thing. But yeah, there's plenty of liveries already to choose from, as you can see here from the Stock Car Brazil car. But yeah, let's have a quick peek over at the session setting and see what we got here. You can choose the date, so you can basically set it for the middle of winter, the middle of summer, and that all affects the time of day as well. So when the sun comes up and goes down, it's a completely dynamic time of day and weather system here in Automobilista 2, and it's completely configurable. So if you want to have a race on a specific date or recreate an event as it was in the past, then yeah, you could do that. And with the time progression options as well, very much similar to most of the sim racing titles, you can either have it off in real time or you can set a multiplier. So if you wanted to emulate a 6-hour race in the course of 1 hour, for example, then you could just set the multiplier to times 6. And having a look at the weather options as well, you can choose 4 slots per session, which either time on the hour or sync to the race. And you can choose between cloudy, between rainy, between foggy, or clear skies. There's quite a lot of options to choose from here, and you can set them to random as well, so you can have a completely dynamic race if you wanted to keep yourself on your toes. Now, most of the other videos that I've done in this style, I usually use a lot of replay footage from the game and use some fancy camera angles and, you know, cut to shots that represent what I'm talking about at the time. Unfortunately, I can't do that for Automobilista 2 in this video because the camera system hasn't really been implemented yet. So I'm just going to put some random stock footage in the background, some test races that I've done basically, and let those play out while I just talk about the game. The very first thing I noticed when I started up Automobilista 2 was how well it runs in VR. It's so refreshing not to have to turn everything down to the absolute minimum in the graphics settings just to get a decent frame rate to record some footage. However, even if it was on low, the Madness engine just looks so good. It'd still blow most of the sims out of the water, but having that performance headroom to turn some graphic settings up just makes so much of a difference. I mean, especially being able to run the desktop monitor at a higher resolution, it just makes the image so much crisper when I'm recording footage for you guys. And another nifty little feature is it appears to keep the settings when you switch between the VR and the non-VR version, so you know you don't have to go and change it every time you want to load up the desktop version and record some replays. Now, speaking of non-VR, I haven't really ran that many laps without using my Oculus Rift headset, so it's not really fair for me to comment on how it performs on the desktop version. All of the content I make on this channel is in virtual reality, and that's just what I do. I don't race on a screen, so the majority of this video is going to be about the virtual reality aspect of Automobilista 2. However, as a little side note, it should be pointed out that at the moment, you can't save replays. So what I like to do in rFactor 2 and Race Room is do a run in VR, drive it nice, and then go and load up the desktop version to get a nice, you know, high quality replay footage of the run. At the moment, I actually have to do a completely separate run in the non-VR version and then record that, so that is a bit of a pain at the moment, but I'm sure Reza Studios are going to sort that out in the next few releases. That said though, the graphics in this game do look absolutely stunning. Even on the highest settings, they're as smooth as butter. This is going to be a very pretty game. It's going to be a lot of nice screenshots coming out from Automobilista 2 in the very near future. But what exactly makes it so pretty though? I mean, many sims can look good, but there's just something about this Madness engine that just sets it apart. And in my opinion, I honestly think it's the lighting. For example, brake lights on the car ahead make your cockpit glow red if you're following them closely enough. The shimmer and reflection on the road surface, especially in wet conditions, is just amazing. And the way that the sun pops in and out from behind trees or fences and just shines straight in your eyes, it's amazing. It all comes together and just brings alive every other aspect of the visuals. Having a complete time of day system also helps, as you know, you're not just stuck in one type of racing condition. It could be the middle of the night, it could be sunset, it could be the middle of the afternoon with blazing sun, or it could be overcast, even hazy, or you could have a massive thunderstorm. There are so many combinations which all affect how the ambient light changes. And those weather conditions and time of day have such an impact on the driving too. The road system that this engine uses to work out which parts of the track have how much grip is just incredible. Rubber builds up, water can pool, dirt gets thrown back onto the track if someone runs wide. It all makes the tarmac dynamic, and you can't just go and run your line regardless. You really have to take these things into consideration. If there's a puddle of water collecting near the inside curb, or if there's a river running across the track, then forget it. You floor it through that, you are losing control of the car, and it just adds another dimension on how you need to approach your race. It's just not a hot lap competition anymore. You really need to factor these things in as an actual racing driver would do. Now, of course, all this talk about the visuals is nice, and you can see that on the screen right now, but you probably want to know how the driving feels too. Well, it really doesn't feel too bad at all. The way the grip is communicated through the force feedback in the wheel and the audio cues which tell you how much grip you have are just really well done. Now, I will say I had to turn my force feedback down by quite some margin from the defaults. I am running a Logitech G29, but I'm still getting some rattling in a straight line, which I need to try and figure out what's going on in the settings there. But the cars in Automobilista 2 have a very nicely defined limit of grip, which you can definitely feel when you're close to, or usually in my case, already way past. It's especially notable in the Super V8 car, which we all know is the Australian supercars car, of course, but for licensing reasons we can't call it that. You can hustle that thing around so much and not worry about having some kind of an iRacing style death wiggle or an rFactor 2 style spin where there's just no coming back. It does need some work, that's for sure, but the general feeling is just very comfortable straight off the bat. And the same goes for the wet weather too. It's a very believable feeling of a lack of grip, and it's not just like it feels like it's been scripted in either. Like I mentioned earlier, the way the road conditions change dynamically is something you can definitely feel through the wheel. Reza have done a fantastic job of being able to communicate this feeling in the car with pretty much the default settings. Now, I've tried a few different cars, and I'm happy to report they all feel completely different too. It's actually quite impressive how unique they are. Of course, like I've said, the Super V8 car is loose but controllable, but if you switch over to the modern F1 car, it is absolutely planted, and just the feeling of the aero grip loading up is amazing. But you still get those snaps if you're a little bit too cheeky and you push it too far that you would come to expect from a high-level single-seater. The Formula 3 car is a really good feeling car too, and it just really conveys the weight transfer in the steering wheel. And notable shout out for the Caterham car. That I've never driven anything like that before. That is such a unique way to drive. You have to kind of oversteer and drift it round the corner. Now, never having driven a Caterham in real life, unfortunately, I can't really comment on if this is realistic, but it just demands a completely different driving style to anything I've ever driven before, whether it be an open-wheeler, a touring car, or even like a front-wheel drive car. Just a new challenge, just keeps you on your toes, so hats off to Reza for that one. However, if you're not happy with the way the car drives, then at the moment, there isn't actually an option to change the car setup and tweak the handling characteristics, at the moment. So, it needs more grip on the front, so I'll soften the suspension or increase the wing, that kind of thing. I mean, you can't even change fuel levels, so it's just a case of driving out of the pits with whatever the default settings are until those options are made available in a future release. And speaking of car choices, the options that they have available are a little bit obscure, to say the least. Now, I understand that Reza are a small developer and they just don't have the money to get the licenses for, your BMWs, your Audis, your Aston Martins, all that kind of thing. So what we've got here is kind of a mishmash of Brazilian touring cars from various years, a handful of prototypes that I've never heard of before, and quite a few single-seaters which are all disguised in code names that we all know, but we can't say, like a 1988 McLaren Formula 1 or a Mercedes 2017 copy. Now, unless you're familiar with these cars or have some kind of, nostalgia from them from running Automobilista 1, it's a little bit meh. I find it hard to get excited about the cars that are available, and I just end up not knowing what to choose. Now, I know it's still a big work in progress, but a lot of these slower cars do kind of feel the same to drive, unfortunately, especially these slower South American style tin tops. They get boring pretty quickly. Now, that's not a problem with the actual game mechanics themselves or the way the cars drive. I mean, the physics are great, but just that choice of car, I personally don't see the appeal. And it's kind of a similar story with the circuits too. Not the boring part, mind, just the obscure part. Like I said earlier, there's a few familiar faces such as Imola, Brands Hatch, Donington, Montreal, but the vast majority of places are probably circuits you've never heard of before, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But when you're trying a new game, you want to try and keep as many of the variables as possible the same, such as the circuits, so you have a known reference point. If you're also trying to learn a new circuit at the same time, it just makes it a little bit tricky to see what's the circuit and what's Automobilista 2 and all that kind of thing. Now, that being said, Automobilista 2 has already introduced me to the Ibarra circuit, which is so much fun to drive and something I never would have driven if it wasn't for this game. I can see myself doing so many laps here, and it kind of gives me hope and gives me some excitement as to what all the other circuits might be. Now, something I have noticed with Automobilista 2 is it's using the same engine as Project Cars 2, right? There's a lot of things that seem to have been ripped straight from Project Cars 2. Well, maybe not so much ripped, but maybe that's just how the engine works. But yeah, there's a lot of similarities. For example, the penalty system seems to be identical. The way the graphic pops up on screen, the way the penalties are worked out, those annoying slowdowns, they're here. Automobilista 2 has these, and the engineer voice that you hear on the radio seems to be exactly the same as well, which is actually, side note, that was set to 0 in the sound options menu when I first loaded the game, so maybe we're not meant to hear that just yet. Maybe that is something that they're working on. I couldn't find any information on the forums about that, but of course this is the beta version, so a lot of things are in progress. Speaking of sound settings, the audio in Automobilista 2 is very immersive. I haven't heard a bad engine yet, and all of the supporting sounds, such as, dirt being kicked up when you run offline, the drivetrain whirring at the top of the rev range, even the ambient weather effects are all done incredibly well. I actually found myself spinning out during a thunderstorm at one testing session, and instead of restarting the car and getting going again, I just kind of sat there and listened to the sound of the rain on the windows for a few minutes. It's that good. My only complaint would be that some of the gear shift sounds can be a little bit clunky, and some of the collision sounds are a little bit loud, but nothing major, and it's all stuff that can be tweaked in the next release. Now, something else that's in this game that is very familiar from Project Cars 2 is the heads-up display. However, only the basic version is available at the moment in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Even if you set it to full in the menu, it always reverts back to minimal, so at the moment, there is no way of seeing your position, your lap time, your race information. Basically, you just have to rely on the dashboard on the car itself. And there's also no damage yet either, it seems. Now, I've had some pretty hefty impacts while I've been testing these cars, but I've never lost a wheel, I've never lost a front wing, and to be fair, I may have blown an engine in one of those early 90s Formula 1 cars, but that's just me being DDF and not using the clutch properly. Moving on to the AI, and I'm happy to report that it is rather good. I can see the potential there, but it does need a little bit of love. Some cars seem to be a little bit unbalanced, shall we say? Like, for example, the Formula 3s. When you're racing against them, all of the other cars seem to have a massive straight line speed advantage, but when they get to the corners, they're pretty awful. So this kind of means that you get left for dead on the straights, but when you catch up to the corner, you're slamming on the brakes and you're being held up, which doesn't make for the best of racing. But the Super V8s, for example, they're really good to race against, and I guess you have to take it on a car-by-car basis at the moment and see what's good. But yeah, you can get quite an entertaining race out of these cars, which is convenient because at the moment there is no multiplayer. That option is currently disabled in the main menu. Same with the leaderboards as well, and custom championships, so I can't really comment on that too much. So I have no idea what the multiplayer side's going to be like. When it is made available, there's very little information at this stage about what it's going to be. I mean, it'd be too much to expect an iRacing level of detail with, driver rankings and always populated servers. But is there going to be something like Race Room's hosted ranked servers for everyone to enjoy? Or is it just going to be something like Project Cars 2 again, where it's just a scattering of public lobbies here and there? Nobody really knows at the moment, and I guess time will just tell. All in all though, taking into account the driving feel, the visuals, the VR implementation, this is a game that has amazing potential. Yeah, sure, there's a few rough edges, but what do you expect? It's not finished yet. Over the course of the next few months, Reza are going to have a wealth of new bug reports and test footage, all the data from us early backers, which is only going to help improve the development. I am a little bit concerned though that once the game does release in a couple of months, it's not really going to be finished. There is quite a lot of work to do, but I honestly think that we could have a classic on our hands, and once it all comes together, it just seems to be ticking all the boxes and takes the best bits from the best sims out there. Like I say, the graphics and the VR from Project Cars 2, the AI, the physics, the handling from Automobilista 1. It's just combines them all into one single complete experience, which I think is going to spoil as sim racers. Now, is it going to be a replacement sim for something like iRacing or rFactor 2 or even Race Room? Probably not. The base game mechanics appear to be there, but it's lacking in the kind of content that those bigger titles have, and unless the mod community jumps on board and does to this game what they did to Assetto Corsa, that, in my opinion, is going to be the biggest thing that holds Automobilista 2 back. Anyway, that pretty much wraps things up. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave it a like and share your thoughts in the comments, whether you're looking forward to seeing Automobilista 2 released in a couple of months or whether you're an early backer like myself. I'm going to be keeping an eye on how this develops over the course of the next few months, so make sure you subscribe and press the notification bell if you want to see that, along with some other great quality sim racing content. I've been DDF Racer, thank you so much for watching.